All right, this lecture comes from my lesson on socialization and social interaction. It is a second social interaction theory I cover. The first is Goffman's dramaturgical theory. This is Blau's exchange theory. Right? Now, Blau's exchange theory is inspired by economic analysis. Here's a simple graph of supply and demand. We'll talk about that in a second. Social interactions are not only about acting or putting on a face before a crowd and trying to protect and promote the self, which Goffman spoke about in dramaturgical theory. Human interactions also involve exchanges, right? So in social interaction, what type of exchanges are involved? What type of commodities? Well, it could be love. It doesn't have to be a material thing. It could be love, friendship, companionship, sex, help, information, or disinformation. That's often passed too often. Beliefs, ideologies, history, uh, uh, resources, labor, money, hate, fear, conflict, various emotional things past, influence peddling, right? Now, in all exchanges, the principle of supply and demand applies. Okay, so let's take a look at that now, right? Here's a graph for supply and demand. On the x-axis, you have quantity of some commodity, right? On the y-axis, you have price, right? So as price goes up, supply goes up, right? I mean, price of the thing goes up. Well, more people say, "Hey, you can make money with that." So I'm gonna, more people try to supply it, right? If price goes down, demand goes up, right? So it's cheaper. Then people say, "Hey, try to buy this thing. It's cheap," right? And there's an alternative analysis, which I like, maybe even better, where you say if supply goes up, price goes down. There's so much of it out there that it's not worth as much, right? And alternatively, if demand goes up, that drives up price. So many people want it, it causes scarcity, and that shortage can drive up price. Okay. All right. Now, there are many exchange aspects of human interaction, but I want to only focus upon one, and that's power and exchange. All right. So power in exchange is based upon market power, either monopoly or monopsony power, right, through which you get leverage. So everyone's kind of heard of the term monopoly, but what is it exactly? A monopoly is the sole supplier of a commodity, right? And that's true, right? But the key to monopoly power is the ability to control price. That's the bottom line. That is the more formal economic definition of monopoly, the ability to control price. And that's important because if you can control price, you can control profits. All right. So controlling price is important. Now, monopoly power is ability to control price as a supplier. Monopsony power, a little bit different, is the ability to control price as a buyer. Right. So I give the example of the early industrial revolution where there wasn't very much diversity in the economy, in production. I mean, the sole industry was textiles, right? And that was a big employer. As a big employer or the big purchaser of labor, right, they held power. Everyone had to go to them to get a job. Well, not everyone, but that was a big source of jobs, right? So that gave them a lot of power. That gave them a lot of leverage over controlling wages, right? If everyone had to go to them and everyone needs to get a job from them, they got a big supply of labor. Well, they can drive down wages, right? As a sole buyer, you can play one supplier off of another to get the best price, or you can try to work out some discounts or kickbacks, right? To get the that suppliers may give to get the contract. All right. So I want to give modern day example of an exchange relationship here, and I give two examples early on just to give you an introduction, feel for what I'm talking about here, and both involve a corporation called the Aegis Corporation. It's a British, what's called a private military security corporation, PMSC, that's private military. These guys are just mercenary groups, right? And they deal in weapons, they deal in, conflict, they deal in providing mercenary soldiers. All right, make money. They make money more than just providing that. All right, so Aegis Corporation, two kind of notorious cases. They orchestrated a coup in Zimbabwe in exchange for oil concessions. So the idea is some guy, he says, "Man, I want to get power." He approaches them and says, "Hey, can you help overthrow the government? If you do, I'll sign to you oil concessions. You get to control some of our oil or all of our oil, whatever it is, right?" So this is classical neo-colonial methods for gaining control of foreign resources. There's nothing new here. This is old school. This is what the British have been doing for a long time, right? One of the methods, right? And one of the guys who was among the coup plotters here was Mark Thatcher, the son of Margaret Thatcher. You know, the Iron Lady. I think that's what they called her, right? Right? That's her boy there, right? Involved in some dirty crap. All right. All right. So another exchange that you see the exchange there. Hey, we'll overthrow the government if you give us something. You give us your oil here, okay? Aegis Corporation was hired to orchestrate another coup in Sierra Leone in exchange for concessions on mining rights. All right, diamonds. Okay. So in this case, Zimbabwe, it was oil. In this case, it was diamonds. Again, it's a classic neo-colonial method for gaining control of a foreign country's resource. All right. All right. What do I have? I have an arrow going this way, and it's pointing to this movie, Blood Diamond. All right. And I actually like this movie. There's not too many Hollywood movies that I like, especially Hollywood history. But there's some truth to what this movie depicted. All right. This is kind of characterized broadly what are called new wars, which are common new wars, all right, where most of the killing is done today, right? It's not major superpower against superpower. It's these small scale, small arms wars, right? Most of the killing are done with small arms in wars today. And some of the characteristics of the new wars, it causes a failed state. You got to break down in the central government, all right? All aspects of that society break down, from law enforcement to the economy to all social arrangements, right? Education, everything breaks down. And what rises is competition between different warlords, right? So yeah, these warlords, I mean, this goes back to like feudal days, right? Think of like feudal Japan, all these bonehead warlords fighting each other. All right, so it's constant war, and it often involves child soldiers, and these guys are socialized to be brutal, right? To be heartless. No civil society. Production capacity is destroyed in the country, right? Warlords fight to control the chief resource, whatever it is, if it's oil or if it's diamonds, that's what they're fighting for, right? To finance the war, and that maintains their power. All right. Now, Western corporations like Aegis Corporation may feed weapons to them, right? So Western corporations feed the war with weapons and ammunition, and this facilitates the extraction of that resource, right? So as a war is being fought, to fight the war, they gotta buy weapons, right? Well, this company sells weapons and they make money there. And then to buy the weapons, they need money. So to do that, they sell whatever resource it is. So they sell the resource, this company buys it, or someone else buys it, and they make profit there. All right. So the idea, it's a way of increasing extraction of a resource out of a country. It's pretty nasty. All right. Okay. Oh, so that's the world we live in. Dirty things are done. All right. So there's nothing new about this British stuff. All right. People think, oh, Great Britain, they were allies in World War I, World War II, so they're good people. Man, they've been the most dirty, brutal people, devious, sneaky, tricky, country. That's how they gained so much power. This is the same old evil, dirty crap the British have been doing for many centuries, especially during their rise to world dominance, roughly 1650 to 1900. This is when they formed the British East India Company, right? I think they formed it right after the Dutch formed theirs, right? It's right about the time of the start of the Anglo-Dutch Wars, the two dominating powers after the defeat of Spain, Portugal in the 30 Years' Wars. It was Dutch and British who ascended, and then they fought each other for dominance, right? 3 wars, and the British eventually won that, became world heavyweight as far as colonial world empire dominating, and they used methods like this to control resources in other countries. All right. So bottom line, control of price can be obtained by controlling either supply or demand, and this is power, right? So the key thing here is power. For example, let's say you need a commodity badly, but don't possess it. I don't know what it is, right? Let's say it's insulin or something like that, right? I don't know. Something you need, right? You don't have it. Someone else does. If that's the case, who has power in the exchange? Well, the person who possesses it. You lack power, right? So the person who controls the commodity, the supply of the commodity, has power. The person who needs it and doesn't have it is in a position of weakness, right? So part of exchange theory analyzes, well, how can you turn the tables? How can you change the situation here? And one is you can find an alternative source of supply. So maybe, I don't know, let's say insulin. You go to Canada, you go to Mexico or something like that. I don't know, right? Eliminate or reduce your need for the other person's commodity. Let's say you really cut back on what you eat. Well, if you're type 1 diabetic, right, you can't do without insulin, because you need insulin to absorb sugar and to metabolize that sugar, right? It doesn't matter how little you eat, you're going to starve, right? Even if you eat, because your cells are not going to be able to uptake and utilize sugar. All right. Well, anyways, that's off to the side. So you can reduce your need, right? Or you can find an alternative commodity to replace his, right? Well, maybe you can find some sort of synthetic insulins. Acquire something needed to improve your bargaining power in exchange, or create demand, a need within the other person for something you possess, some commodity you possess. So I want to give you an example with a marriage. And here's a couple, let's say they've been married a few years and things are kind of chilling out between them, all right? And the guy still is pretty hot and heavy for sex, but the woman is, really not interested, all right? And so in this case, he wants it, he needs it. She has what he needs, but she's not giving it. So in this case, she has power, he lacks power. So how can he flip the situation here? Well, he can find an alternative supply, right? So he can maybe he gets a mistress, or he goes a prostitute. Here, I got a little picture, I guess, kind of like a prostitute, I guess. Or he tries to reduce his need for the person's commodity. So he takes a lot of cold showers, all right, whatever. Find alternative commodity to replace his. Well, maybe he goes to internet porn instead. Maybe he gets a hobby. He tries to preoccupy himself. Try to acquire something that she needs or wants to improve his bargaining position. All right. Well, maybe it's bling. Maybe it's a new car, or new, I don't know, whatever. Something that she wants. Right. You acquire that. Then you can make the exchange. All right. The last way for this, I don't really know of a way here, so I'll give some basic examples here and some classic examples from history. One is a schoolyard drug dealer. All right. So the idea is you want to create demand for something that you possess, right, to gain power. So a schoolyard drug dealer may, first time going to this school, right? He comes along and supplies free samples of crack. Right. Now, crack is highly addictive. Cocaine is highly addictive. Possibly the most addictive drug there is. Right. Cocaine, crack, related. So he gives free samples to get these kids addicted, and then now that creates demand. Right. They need to get more. Right. Once they're addicted. Or heroin's another example. Right. All right. So he's creating demand. Now, another example is human traffickers or pimps. They get their girls addicted to drugs and they force them into to create leverage, force them into prostitution, for which they got to do it to get their drugs. All right. Another example of using drugs is British opium trade. Example is a triangle trade. It's an example of a triangle trade. So, triangle trade, right? And the idea behind this trade is you're making profit off of arbitrage. All right, we said that arbitrage is buying a commodity in a market where there is a low price, and then shipping it to a different market, which is a high price, and then selling it, to make a profit above your shipping costs. All right, and you can make a lot of money this way. This was the main way of making money in classical times. All right. All right, and that was part of economic practice called mercantilism, which is actually far more complex and involved. All right, so in this case, you have a triangle trade. Here's England, here's India, here's China. So England, they're the first to industrialize. They can make manufactured goods, right? Largely textiles, right? So India used to be the cotton center of the world, producing cotton and then making cotton fabrics, the best in the world at making cotton fabrics. But what happened was England developed the means of making it with machines. So that's where the Industrial Revolution began, machine manufacture of textiles. All right. And, it's not just textiles. They manufactured other goods, tools, and so forth, iron products. Right. So they take the stuff and they sell it, ship it to India. They sell it for a profit. You make a profit here. Right. And with the profit, you buy opium. Right? You ship that to China. You sell that there and make another profit. So you make a profit here, you make another profit, right? And with the profit here, you use that to buy tea and silk and porcelain, things like that. Other things that were in demand from China. And you ship that to England and you make another profit. Or you ship that to Europe, right? Other markets. You make another profit. So you make profit, 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 each leg. That's a triangle trade. Right? Keep it going. Now, the weak link in this whole thing was opium. It was a critical link because when the trade first developed, China had no demand for anything England could get them. Right? So they to get all this stuff, they would have to pay China in silver, which is the classic Chinese currency. Right? They didn't have a gold-based currency; they had silver-based currency. So that resulted in a rapid depletion of British silver reserves, all right? And that stops a trade, right? You run out of money. Sorry, it's done, right? Your means of profiting is done. So they had to find another means, and then they found they can exploit opium and opium addiction in China, right? So the critical link in this triangle trade was opium sales to China. The British had to create and sustain demand for opium through addiction, right? Now, opium trade became so profitable for the British that the British government in 1833 rescinded the East India trade company's monopoly on opium and took direct control. Right, the British government essentially became the monopoly drug pushers, monopoly dope dealers. Right. All right. So with the inflood of opium's just flooding into China, right? Well, that's not good for China. They had bad effects. One was they suffered a rampant drain of currency. So that situation where they're enjoying a surplus of silver coming in, right? Now it's reversed, right? Currency's flowing out. If it's not tea, silk, porcelain, well, the silver's coming out, all right? So they had a rapid drain of their currency, loss of money supply, right? And then you had rampant drug addiction, increasing crime, poverty, and death, right? So the Chinese government figured, oh, this is bad. All right, we got to try to stem this devastation to their society. So they blocked opium importation, right? Well, Britain wasn't gonna stand for that because this is their source of wealth, this triangle trade, and it's being blocked here. You cut out opium, that cuts the whole thing down, right? The whole thing falls apart. So they said no way, and they fought two opium wars. First one was 1839 to 42, and one was 1856 to 60, right? Both of these wars, Britain gained multiple concessions. I think U.S. U.S. gained some concessions out of China here too. I think in the second one, I forget some port access, Yangtze River access, maybe, I don't know. I can't remember all the stuff. But anyways, other nations gained stuff too. France gained stuff, I believe, in this second Opium War. But Britain gained things like, they opened, I believe, in the First War, opened 5 ports to trade, and they acquired Hong Kong Island and things like that. All right, so they gained a foothold into the Canton area. All right, okay. Explain which was a key commercial area. Explain the 2 ways Britain attained. Well, they used addiction and they used military force to gain leverage. Okay, both cases. That's exchange, right? You can use both of those to get the exchange advantage. So another case of using drugs, we're continuing on the same thing, was run by the CIA, right? Heroin operations in the Golden Triangle. Golden Triangle being Burma, Laos, Thailand. Burma is over here. I think it's called Myanmar now, right? Yeah. Anyway, Burma's over here. Thailand's here. Here's Laos. These 3 areas, these 2 countries were the big opium growers, which then was converted into heroin, which is much more powerful than morphine, right? So this was done during the time of the Vietnam War. So here's Vietnam. We're fighting a war here, all right? And this is a legal war because the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution made it legal, all right? Okay, even though it was manipulated. We'll talk about that maybe, I guess, in the second era. But there was also parallel wars fought in Laos and Cambodia. Secret wars, unfinanced, illegal wars, unfinanced by the government, not financed by the U.S. government, right? So how did they get their money? That's a key thing here. Keep that in mind. How do we get the money to fight these wars? All right. So let's review the Vietnam War. In order to fight the Vietnam War, right, which means calling up a draft, putting boots on the ground in Vietnam, and all the massive military weapons and ammunition appropriation bills to finance that war, right? There had to have been a legal basis. Now, what was that legal basis? If you recall, it was a Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, right, that authorized the president to use military force. It's all you need to fight any damn war you want, right? And how do we get that? All right. You remember the whole manipulation with a 30-day plan, threat signals, all right, combined with actual attacks. Yeah, we're going to invade you. We're going to invade you. We're get them all jacked up for 2 months, right? Two big waves of threat signals. Then we start dropping commandos into North Vietnam, and they start blowing up crap, right? And then we brag about it, right? And then we have covert black ops. 2 attacks on the North Vietnamese islands just off their coast, right? Bombing the hell out of them, right? And then we send a U.S. ship on a different mission, right? Totally unbeknownst to them, that they're being set up, right? Send them right next to where we bombed these 2 islands, right? And as they're going up, we have 2 more attacks, 2 air attacks on North Vietnam, right? We're just jacking them up and sending a ship up there to get whacked, and it gets attacked. Right, it gets away scot-free, right? After 3 torpedo boats attacked it, but then 5 hours later, the 2 ships are sent back: the Maddox, the original ship, and the Turner Joy. And there was believed to have been an attack, which never occurred, but based upon that, and it was reported by Captain Herrick that it's now doubtful second attack occurred. He reported that by midnight local time. Didn't matter. Johnson called up an airstrike, and the next day they bombed North Vietnam, and then they sent the congressional resolution, the Gulf of Tonkin Resolution, before Congress. They didn't draft this in response to that attack. They had this sucker. The first draft was delivered shortly at same day or day before George Bundy submitted his 30-day plan. All right. They had this thing cooked up already, way back in May. This is August 2nd, the first attack occurred, right? And they sent the congressional resolution before Congress. 100% of congressmen signed it. Right? Only 2 senators voted against it. The only 2 senators that didn't have their head squarely shoved up their ass. All right? I swear. Our best and brightest, our leaders of our country being simple, and they fall for it again. And, any money, if another one's done, they'll fall for it again. History repeats itself because people don't learn from history. All right. So now, at the same time we're fighting the Vietnam War, we're fighting wars in Laos and Cambodia. CIA, private guys, right? Private companies. One company was Air America. The movie's called Air America. It kind of made fun of the whole thing. It's a comedy, right? It's a pretty mediocre movie, right? But it's kind of it makes fun of the whole thing here. All right. So let's see. The LBJ administration manufactured the legal basis for the Vietnam War, but there was no legal basis for these wars. So with no legal basis, you couldn't finance them. You couldn't use it personnel, at least legally, right? So where did they get the money? Well, they got it from heroin, drugs, right? Now people are going to say, no, CIA, come on, right? This is not new. This has been done since the 1950s, right? Why? Because heroin was a big trade commodity here. Going way back, to British days, all right? Importing heroin, opium from India, all right? Heroin became big. Okay. Old days, well-established market for this. So they're just using a mechanism that's going on there. But they expanded it. All right, so here is a triangle trade. It's another triangle trade. Okay, I'll explain the triangle trade here, but let's go to, where's 1? Okay, so let's go to 2 here. So U.S. involvement in the heroin trade began in the early 1950s, right, with the Korean War. Right, Korean War was 1950 to 53, I believe. All right, so early 1950s, right? This is so damn common knowledge, but Americans will deny it, right? In fact, it's so well known, they made a movie of it, just laughing about this, right? It's kind of a farce, right? But it shows some of the elements, right? The actual elements, it's kind of funny because this movie starts off with this very, how do I want to say, picturesque, idyllic, shot in the middle of this field with colorful flowers, all right? And if you don't know what you're looking at, well, those are poppy plants. Big flowers, right? They're nice, pretty flowers, right? You think there's some sort of like exotic flower. Well, no, they're heroin. They're opium plants, right? So they're poppy plants, right? And it's kind of funny here. They're making fun of that, right away. And they're showing the transport of pigs and food and so forth, right? Shipment of the opium, right? And then sending to labs and converting the opium to morphine, then to heroin, right? All right. So now, one of the companies involved in this was Air America. It was one of 2 CIA front companies, actually one of 3, right? So the other air transport company was Civil Air Transport. Air America was one, right? Both were involved in transporting food, drugs, and weapons. All right, that was part of the triangle trade here. I'll get to it. All right, the CIA conducted a triangle trade. All right, the bank that laundered all the money was another CIA front company. That's a third front company called the Nugan Hand Bank. It was staffed by CIA officers. It's not being staffed by, guys with MBAs and so forth, right? Finance degrees, whatever, right? It's staffed by CIA and military officers, generals and admirals. And one of the key guys was William Colby. Colby at the time was Vietnam station chief, and later he became the director of the CIA, top dog. Okay. When was he director? I'm not going to look it up. All right. Anyways, so there he is, top guy in the bank here, CIA guy. Okay. Okay, so let's see. I think I'm going to talk about the Golden Triangle here now, the Triangle trade. So Golden Triangle was, again, Burma, Laos, Thailand. They had areas up there, right? Each of them growing poppy plants. And the peasants would grow opium, right? The opium would be shipped by these air transport companies to labs, right? Where they converted, they get the morphine isolated out of it, right? And then if you acetylate morphine with a simple chemical reaction where you attach acetyl group, right? That's it. Just a simple, chemical reaction. Very easy to do. You make heroin, which is many times more powerful and many times more addictive, and then you sell that, right? A lot of U.S. troops got addicted to heroin, grown with the support of the CIA. All right, and then so the CIA would help sell it. They would launder the money. All right, the bank that laundered the money was the Nugan Hand Bank in Australia, and they were eventually shut down by the Australian government. Right, Australian government finally figured out what the hell they're doing. They shut this bank down. All right, top dog in the bank was William Colby. Right, with that money, they purchased weapons for warlords to fight communists in unauthorized wars. All right. Laos and Cambodia, fight were not authorized by the Congress. All right, and they would also buy food, right, and provide the food to the peasants. All right. So the key means of making sure that the peasants grow opium was to prevent them from producing their own food. All right. So that was the key means of maintaining power, maintaining control. All right. So the key was to maintain dependency. If the villagers tried to grow their own food, the CIA would defoliate local crops with Agent Orange so that the villagers would have to produce opium as a cash crop and then sell that to get money and then buy food from the CIA, right? And this dependency meant the CIA had control, and control is power, right? That's the exchange here, getting power in exchange here. Key means was to destroy their means of becoming independent. Growing their own food, producing their own food, right? It has to be provided to them. So, all right. Where are we at here? Oh, okay. I did Nugan Hand Bank already. All right. So now another case was involving drugs was the Contras in Nicaragua. I read and analyzed the Iran-Contra investigation report, and in it, it provided no definitive evidence of direct U.S. involvement in drug trafficking. So unlike Viet or Southeast Asia, right, there was no direct evidence. Here, this is direct, absolute U.S. support for drug trade here, right? There's no direct evidence here, but there's only the testimony of Fabio Ernesto Carrasco, who was a pilot for the drug dealer Jorge Morales, and who flew over 5 flights between Costa Rica and the U.S., carrying drugs in the U.S., and then weapons for the Contras, under the belief that his flights were authorized by the CIA. That's what he believed, right? That doesn't necessarily make it so. Maybe, maybe not, right? Who knows? I don't know. The investigation said there's no definitive direct evidence of a U.S. involvement. However, there was plenty of evidence stated by the Iran-Contra report that U.S. officials knew the Contras were drug dealers, right? That's who we're supporting, right? U.S. officials knew that drug money was being used to finance a war against the government, right? U.S. officials knew that Contras were both selling drugs and weapons that we supplied to them. So we would supply weapons illegally in violation of the Boland Amendment, right, which prevented us to supply weapons to the Contras, right? So the Reagan administration did this illegally, right? What did the Contras do with a lot of those weapons? They sold it to make money, right? The Contras used extreme violence, right, in counterinsurgency methods. Now these counterinsurgency methods were nasty. I mean, if you go in and study Operation Condor and the methods that were used and that we taught at Fort Benning, Georgia, in the School of Americas, right? They were basically, the methods that we taught were patterned after the French counterinsurgency methods that they used around the world to control their colonies, right? Whether Algeria or Vietnam or whatever, wherever, right? Wherever they had their colonies. West Africa was big, Southeast Asia was big for them, right? And they would use very dirty, vicious methods, kidnap, torture, murder, right? Nasty. And they're using this, right? Including death squads, right? The Contras were nasty, just like Guatemala. After we overthrew the Guatemalan government, right? Guatemala descended into 40 years of just terror, right? Massive death squads, right? Now Americans are gonna say, no, USA only do good in the world. Oh, come on, right? So the Reagan administration illegally sold weapons to Iran to purchase weapons for the Contras. And here's the thing: we're going to talk about this later, right? Was it really about supporting the Contras? Was it about getting out the hostages, or was it about fueling the war in the Middle East? All right. So we'll examine this, right? And I'll tell you right now, very little. The Iran Contra report said very little of the money acquired from selling weapons to Iran actually went to the Contras. It went to the enterprise. So you know how you got these front companies for the CIA, Air America, Civil Air and Transport, all right? And you had the Guggenheim Bank. Well, the key front company was not a CIA company. It was an NSA company, National Security Advisor company, called the Enterprise, right? The money went here, and where it went from there, who knows, right? I don't know. Oliver North was probably throwing a lot of expensive sex parties or something like that, right? I don't know where the money went. All right. Then go to the Contras. All right. We'll talk about the things that are done, this whole thing, and what the evidence shows about what the real motive for the weapon sales to Iran were. All right. That's going to come later. All right. Okay, if someone can plant an idea or image or incident in your mind without you knowing it, and this happens all the time. People say, no, you can't influence me, you can't manipulate me, right? Hell, every damn day in social reality, some bullshit is passed, right? And people just blather all over it. Like, oh, yeah. They don't think, and they just, it's not based on anything factual. It's just what everyone's saying, and, it dominates their mind. It's a soul thing in their brain, right? You can't plant things. Come on, every day it's done. Without your knowing or being influenced, they don't know. To them, it's reality. Everyone's saying it, so it's got to be true. Influence and manipulate does that person have power over you? So if you can plant someone, and that's what a Trojan horse is. If you remember my third lesson, I talked about semiotics, influence, social influence, right? Right? We talked about going back to power and exchange, how it's all about influencing perceptions. If you influence perceptions, you can control actions, and if you can control actions of collective actions of a lot of people, that gives you power, right? Now, the best way is not to force them with gunpoint. The best way is to control their beliefs, right? Then they're going to voluntarily, with all their heart, do what you want, right? Okay. And is an exchange being conducted? Yeah, right? But if you're not aware it's being conducted, do you have any power in exchange? No, you have weakness. You don't even know the exchange is being conducted. You don't even know you're being manipulated. Can that be done? And I say, remember trees. I taught you detonators. Yeah, I taught you detonators, how detonators are manufactured for wars, right? This is part of it, right? How do you manufacture wars here, right? Can the media plant images and ideas in your head? Oh, we're just talking about racism, right? Do the media discuss real data, national level data? No. They'll just show you one case and they'll blow it all up and say racism, right? Well, if you look at the data, it's not saying that, right? Per arrest, white people are shot just as much, if not a little bit more, than black people. Per arrest. All right? You can't go by population because black people are committing more crime. You got to go by the times you interact with police, which is per arrest. Right? And that's another way the media will lie. They'll distort, right? I try to be honest, right? They're gonna attack me all the way, right? I just separated out Hispanics from white people, which I think is totally valid to do, and I know I'm gonna get attacked on that, right? Can movies always pump up some bogus? Hollywood history is the worst. It's just gonna pump up some total bullshit, baseless historical thing, right? Wrap it up in patriotism and we're the good guys and so forth, right? They're the evil guys, right? American Sniper is one example. There's so many examples, right? That's what Hollywood history does, right? Argo is another example. Very little of anything is true in in both of those movies, right? Like 95% of it's manufactured. Only a small little bit, okay, that happened, right? They manufacture like 95% of both of these movies. And this is a Clint Eastwood movie. I can't stand that guy. He's a major propagandist. Bullshit, right? And people walked out of that movie, American Sniper, saying, yeah, let's go kill some Iraqis. All right? I mean, that war, the whole war is manufactured and bad, and it just justifies it, right? Through manufactured lies. All right. TV, can the news media plant stuff? Yeah, they do. I can't stand the media. I seriously cannot stand the media. The worst of them all is Fox News, by far the worst, right? But they're all bad, each in their own way. Fox News is crazy bad. I mean, the only reason why people watch it is because that's what they want to hear, right? They don't honestly consider the credibility of it. That's just what they want to hear, and okay, that's true because that's what I want to hear. WMD, was that not planted in people's minds? Was not the association between 9/11 and Iraq planted in people's minds? Did that not work? Trojan horse. Everyone fell for it. Well, not everyone in this case, but the vast majority of Americans fell for that. Over 70% believe that Iraq did 9/11. And people that you can't manipulate me. Yeah, right. Threat signals. All right. I told you threat signals, right? When we're sending threat signals to Vietnam, they sent threat signals. This is part of the plan, right? D-17. Release a modified version of the Jordan Report. Aggression from the North, right? Weapon supply from the North. And then right before the Gulf of Tonkin, they released communists threatened to launch major attack. And sure enough, they do, right? Now, you plant it in head, you're leading them to expect it. And then when you get an incident, they're going to see it that way, all right? That's how you prepare. That's planning a Trojan horse to control the direction of perception. And then the whole thing with multiple cognitive framework games. I told you for Vietnam, how you could show one population a totally different set of things, threats to them. You show another population threats to them. When they see the same incident, they're going to see it totally opposite, right? And that's going to justify what they are led to believe. Social reality waves, these are planted every damn day, right? And I swear I've seen over 20,000 of these work, and they never stop working, right? People think, you can't fool me. They're fooled every damn day, and this will never stop working. And you wonder, how can they not think through this? Whatever's fed in front of their face, they'll believe. They won't see anything else. They won't consider the possibility of anything else. They'll have only one thing in their brain, and that's what's waved in their face right now. That's what dominates. All right, so that leads me to the main topic here. This whole topic is about oil in the Middle East, U.S. involvement in the Middle East. I'll go through through the history of oil. All right, the history of U.S. involvement in the Middle East. And you'd be surprised at dirty stuff we've done. And how war in the Middle East is profitable. That's a bottom line here. It is profitable in many ways. All right, we'll get to here. This diagram will explain it. All right, so that's what we're looking at here. All right, So that's the overall big picture where I'm leaning to. I'm going to try to introduce some basic concepts to kind of spoon feed you bit by bit to get you an understanding here. Um, okay, so a fairly recent example of power in exchange using these methods, all these 5 methods here I told you about right here. Okay, how do you turn the tables here? Involves oil industry, right? So some key little side notes here are a little bit of historical facts. I'll give you far more when I get into it, but this is just I guess, an introduction. So U.S. oil production in the United States peaked in 1970. Now that was predicted by a guy named Hubbard, a geologist, and sure enough, it came true. He called it peak oil, and sure enough, 1970 it happened. Right. From then on, it was all downhill from there. And this graph kind of shows it. Here is U.S. Traditional oil production methods in the continental U.S. Here, the pink is the addition of Alaskan oil. So it started off, it initially rose a little bit, then it fell off too, trailed off. See, it's trickling down. The green thing here is the advent of fracking, right? Which is a huge new source of oil, and I'm not sure how long that's going to last. All right, we got to transition over to electric transportation prior to that, right? Before this running out, but that will happen once we get technology going here, and it's going to happen steady, and I think sooner than you think. With battery improvements. Okay. Yeah. So we reached peak oil, and then in 1971, U.S. oil demand exceeded our production capacity. Right. So what that meant is we lost control of price. And let me explain it here. So let's say this is U.S. production for our consumption. This is production capacity. This is 100% production capacity based upon peak oil production capacity here. All right. And if your production capacity is above what you're producing to consume, then you got some spare production capacity. Okay, we got some leeway here. We can, right? So if you're consuming and producing for this amount here, for the market here, right? If you raise production a little bit, that's going to drop oil price. If you lower production a little bit, that's going to raise oil price, and then gasoline price, right? Gas at the pump, whatever. Okay, right. So you got some with spare production capacity. You got some leeway. You got some, fudge factor here where you can control price up or down. Increase production, drop price. Lower production, raise price, right? But what happened was in 1971, at least in Texas, because the Texas Railroad Commission set pro-rationing, which is how much. I'm jumping ahead maybe, but pro-rationing. Texas Railroad Commission was a cartel authorized way back in the FDR administration to, preserve and conserve oil as a vital strategic resource of our country, which it is, right? During the Great Depression, and so they allowed internal cartels within the country, which are normally broken down by the Justice Department in its antitrust efforts, right? But for good reasons, it was allowed, right? They set pro-rationing, which is quotas, right? At 100% production capacity. So everyone gets produced at their max ability, right? And the reason is here's our production capacity, right? Right? Peak oil here, drop it off, helped by, hedged by Alaskan oil. But what's happening to consumption? Consumption is going up, right? Our economy is still growing. More people are driving. Our population's growing, right? Gasoline, oil consumption is going up. More homes are being heated by it, whatever. More products are being produced from oil, right? And so we're falling behind the curve, right? And by 1971, right about here, we're producing at max capacity. So we're producing just to produce enough, and we're not even making it, all right? So what that means is we have no more spare production capacity, which means we have no longer any control over oil price. or gas, and then gasoline price. So we lost control of price, and that meant the monitor of spare production, who is the guy who controls price, controls production, switched over to OPEC, especially countries like Saudi Arabia, which had whopping production capacity. They had, going back, I believe into like the late 70s, they had 10 million barrel production capacity a day. All right. And they're producing it only like 3.5 million barrels per day. They have tons of spare production capacity. They can control price, right? So they control price, and what does that mean? If they control price, well, we got to go back to the concept of monopoly. That is monopoly power. If you control price, you have monopoly power. All right. All right. Now, so what happened then was in 1973, the Arab countries decided to try to get some payback against Israel, and they launched an attack called the Yom Kippur War. And I read the Nixon administration's internal communications discussing that war, and I tell you what, it's kind of funny. On the first day, when they first got word of the war, they were laughing and joking. You read the stuff, they're like, Israel's gonna kick their ass again, just like the 7-Day War, or 6-Day War in '67, right? And within a day, they're saying, "Holy crap, Israel may go under," right? So they scrambled and they sent out massive shipments of weapons, multiple C-5 Galaxy cargo planes, stuffed full of weapons and tanks and everything, right? And you couldn't keep that from the Arabs. They saw it, right? So they got pissed and they said, "No more oil for you. Screw you." Right? They cut off oil. They embargoed oil to the United States. Well, that's not good because we're dependent upon imports now, right? And they cut off oil to other countries as well, right? It wasn't just the U.S., right? And so oil prices quadrupled, right? Like fast, went up 4 times. So if it's like $5 a barrel in '73, overnight it's now $20 a barrel, right? All right. So oil is being used as a weapon. Okay. We'll later see that debt is used as a weapon. That's our counter to oil being used as a weapon. We use debt as a weapon. You'll see that coming up here. All right. And then in 1979, 6 years later, the Iran Revolution occurs, and then Iranian oil production plummets, right, which causes oil prices to triple. So within the span of 6 years, right, 4 times 3 is 12. Oil prices went up 12 times. So if oil was at $5 a barrel, it went up to $60 a barrel. Right. The massive increase in oil price killed the U.S. economy, caused massive inflation, and that caused a recession. Right. Maybe not quite a depression, but inflation and recession together is stagflation. That's a term that was thrown around. I guess it was created during Jimmy Carter era, right? So what caused the inflation was not an overheated economy. Usually, what happens if the economy, for example, during the Vietnam War, our economy is running in the red line, right? It's speeding real fast, right? We have, we're fighting 2 wars at the same time. We're fighting the Vietnam War and the war on poverty, right? There's a lot of cash being thrown in, a lot of government fiscal policy, right? And that's overheating the economy. And as the economy speeds up, right, and more goods are purchased, that puts pressure on, scarcity of goods, and that drives up price. So prices are going up, right? And then prices going up, and they're going up too fast. Well, that's not good because that pressures up interest rates, right? And that slows the economy. That slows our ability to purchase goods. That slows our ability to invest, right? And now, the inflation wasn't being caused by an overheated economy. The inflation was being caused by an external source, an external increase in a major and important input commodity, which is oil, right? And that caused the inflation. That caused a recession. And so you got recession and inflation, the worst of both worlds. You don't have a strong economy causing inflation. You got inflation causing a weak economy, That's a double whammy, and they called that stagflation, right? And Jimmy Carter was then hated, right? Also, by this time, 1980, Western industrialized nations lost all control over foreign oil. So foreign oil, you know, early on, there were 7 major companies, and someone gave the term. I'm not sure who. I think someone in OPEC gave it the term the Seven Sisters. With the 7 major oil companies, most of which were U.S., right, but also British Petroleum and Dutch Shell, right? Standard Oil, Exxon, and I don't know, Citgo, or I don't know what the hell they were. Um, the major oil companies, right? So, there was a high concentration of developing foreign oil, right? Well, eventually they lost control. And I'll go through how and why they lost control, largely through the emergence of independent oil producing companies, right? Smaller scale, who they can contract, these individual companies could contract to, right? Get the technology, get the technical support to do this, right? Uh, so oil is all right. So I say oil is the single most important material resource for modern industrial economies, and this is going to go down to here. We'll talk about why down here, right? But here's a statement from Harold Ickes. I don't know if you remember my discussion of Pearl Harbor, right? Harold Ickes is the guy who said that, hey, now we know our way into this war. It's by cutting off oil to Japan, which will make it not only, possible but easy. He said to get this war in what do you say, a definite way, something like that. But he said easy to get in this for us to get in this war, right? By cutting off oil, right? He said that June 23rd of 1941. But in October, this is after the Germans invaded Russia, Soviet Union with Operation Barbarossa. Is that June 23rd, June 21st or 2nd or 3rd of 41, right? Somewhere around there. And there was a threat that Germany is going to get the Soviet Baku oil, right? And then what's right below that? Right below that is Middle East oil, Iran and Iraq, right? That was all Middle East oil back then. They didn't discover oil in Kuwait yet. They didn't discover oil in Saudi Arabia yet. The Middle East oil was Iran and Iraq. So he said, he said, the big threat is, the Nazis getting that Soviet oil, right? And then right below that, it's going to be Iranian oil, right? And then right next to that is Iraqi oil. You have all the oil of the damn Middle East, right? Which is the lion's share of oil, far more than U.S. oil reserves, right? And then he says this: it would be truly ironical if the United States, having set the pace of industrialization by the use of oil, should be outdistanced by Germany. So Ickes, what he's saying here is the modern industrial economy was founded upon, the backbone of it is oil, right? He's understanding resources here. Okay, right? Oil made it possible, largely through transportation, but oil, later on by World War II and thereafter became the key resource for producing material, right? More and more so today as chemical, knowledge and synthesis increases. All right, so we'll take another statement. So that's Ickes, Harold Ickes. I liked old Harold. I think I was a decent guy. All right, smart guy. He got the strategic situation. He understood it. All right. Now, destroying oil. Okay, this is a statement by this guy here, James Woolsey, who was director of the CIA, right? And he wrote an essay called "Destroying Oil's Monopoly and OPEC's Cartel." All right, I agree with it. This monopoly should be destroyed here. I don't think we got the. I don't think we, the way we destroyed OPEC, right? That's what's problematic. How OPEC is destroyed. We'll get. That's part of what I discussed down here, right? And all this. Could you destroy OPEC? If they were in the United States, we'd bust it up with the Justice Department, antitrust laws. Hey, that's not a problem, right? If there's another way, economic way of doing it, okay, fine. If you do it with war, well, that's another thing. I got a problem with that, right? Oil's monopoly, yeah. You want to destroy oil's monopoly. How do you destroy that? With electrifying transportation, right? You're not going to electrify all of it. You're not going to electrify a lot of really long distance stuff, all right? Especially aircraft, right? Because batteries do not have the energy density, right? Unless you use some sort of hybrid thing where you're making more efficient use of that jet engine, right? By producing not just thrust but producing electricity and using that to power turbine fans, right? And it's more efficient, right? But as far as right? But as far as like truck transportation, things like that, yeah, right. And truck transportation is huge in our country. I believe 70% of the goods transported in our country goes by truck, not train. Right? Okay. So this is what he says, quote, as the distinguished free market economist Frederick Hayek stressed, and in similar words, Adam Smith and Milton Friedman, yeah, I like old Milton, did as well. Monopolies and cartels are the major enemies of free markets. Destroying them should be the first priority. Okay, destroy them, but how do you destroy OPEC? That's the tricky question, right? Of those in government who want their societies to have the advantages of a market economy, yet we have lived for decades with our entire transportation system dominated by a cartel, OPEC, and nested within a monopoly. That monopoly is oil for transportation. Together, they undermine our ability to let the free market respond to increased demand for transportation fuel via market mechanisms. The market is not permitted to work adequately to increase the supply of fuel and to limit the price we must pay for oil. Monopoly power, right? Thus, oil's monopoly over transportation and the cartel's control over a huge share of oil production together increasingly threaten our economic viability, our national security. These go hand in hand. Economic viability and national security go hand in hand. Right? This is the basis of how you live right here. Okay? Right? And the stability of many other nations as well. Right? And as far as stability, other nations are much more prone to instability than us. Especially, I'm not going to get into that. All right. So oil has a big important impact upon economic viability. That's what he's saying here. Oil is huge for our economy. That's what Ickes is saying. All right. I know people are going to attack and say, "Oh, oil's not that big a deal." Right. So a huge share of oil production. Oh, I have here OPEC. OPEC is about 40% of world oil production. That's a huge chunk in one organization. A single organization, that's huge, right? That they wield a lot of power. Plus, they get together with other countries as well. They get together with the Netherlands, not Netherlands, Norway. Sometimes they get together with Mexico, and they often get together these days with the Soviet Union, right? Or not Soviet, Russia. Sorry, Soviet Union is gone, right? And so it's with that, it's bigger than 40%. They wield a lot of power. Key question. If we no longer have spare production capacity, how can we control price? How can we destroy OPEC? Prevent them from controlling price? And how can we control price? All right. How do we gain monopoly power back? All right. Keep that in mind because that's a key thing for what we do in the Middle East. All right. All right. You got to think strategically here. That's what these guys do. What do you think they do? They sit around and I don't know, pick fuzz out of the belly button. I don't know. All right, so I want to show you why oil is such a strategic resource here. So number one, industrial economies, machine mass production economies, large scale. You have high concentration of production in one place, right? Far beyond your ability to consume in that one local area, right? So industrial economies have been built upon oil because they are dependent upon commerce, trade, right? And trade is dependent upon transportation, right? So let's say there's a little town here, you know, that grows turnips, right? Well, can you eat all the damn turnips you grow there? You live only off of turnips? No, you got to ship those out, right? And you use the money you gain for shipping and selling it some other way to buy whatever you need, right? Now, same thing with, let's say, Maytag, one of the major Maytag manufacturing towns is this little town in Newton, Iowa, right? Let's say they've only produced turnips and Maytag in Newton, Iowa, right? Well, you know, what do I say, 15K? I think that maybe 15. I believe that's 15K population, right? They got a small population. They can't use all the damn washing machines that you make. So they got to ship it out, right? Or they're going out of business. So modern industrial, you know, mass production requires transportation. That's the way it is, right? You've always required transportation going back to ancient days, right? It's even more so with the Industrial Revolution. And transportation these days is based on oil, right? That's the energy source. Yeah, highly concentrated energy source, high density energy per mass, right? So it works, right? Now, it's not oil is not just used for transportation. These days, oil is used to make just about everything, right? And I say this, so synthetic chemical industry, you know, which is largely the organic chemical industry because it's carbon based, all right, right. Uh, what do I want to show you here? Okay, I'll show you this. All right, I'll show you this. So if a product is not made of basic natural materials like metal, if it's not made of metals, which is processed a little bit, right, but not that complex, right? If it's not made of wood, not made of glass, ceramics, or cements, right? Animal products or plant products, right? This is limiting what you can make here. That's the way it used to be. It is probably made from oil. More than likely, it's made from oil. All right. So here are some products made from oil. It's a partial list, 144 items in these four columns here, of 6,000 items, right? Made from oil. All right. Uh, so I say here, out of a 42-gallon barrel of oil, right, 19.4 gallons goes into gasoline. All the rest goes somewhere else, some other product. All right, or is used for heating, or whatever, right? So, you know, not just solvents, any pharmaceutical drug, any drug, anything in your medicine cabinet, from zit cream to shampoo to shaving cream, yeah, I don't know, whatever you got in there, right? Everything, right? Upholstery, bicycle tires, cassettes, CD players, vitamins, putty, percolators, inks, dyes, umbrellas, roofing, you know, nylon ropes, shampoos, what's that, water pipes? Oh yeah, PVC, antifreeze, clothes, heart valves, anesthetics, dentures, any cream, right? Golf balls, model cars, artificial turf, CDs, hand lotions, you know, anything. Ballpoint pens, toolboxes, purses, epoxy, any synthetic fabric, rayon, nylon, whatever, Dacron, you know, um, uh, artificial limbs, folding doors, you know, folding chairs, folding tables, detergents, footballs, you know, basketballs, lipsticks, paints, right? Plastics, any plastic. Okay, right. The vast majority of our products today are not made of natural materials; they're made of oil. I mean, you make rope? You make, you know, maybe cotton shirts and whatever. Right? Vast majority of stuff is made from oil. Why oil? Because it's made of carbon, and the most readily, easily broken down, ready to modify and manipulate chemically is oil. Simple, simple broken down carbon chains. All right, and I'll get into the chemistry a little bit after I get through here. All right. Okay, so let's go through the why it's strategic. Now, what happens is because so much oil is used for transportation and products, right? More for transportation, but still a lot of it's used for products, right? Price of oil, if price of oil increases, well, that's a huge inflationary factor, right? Just one commodity, oil, right, can cause big inflation, right? Now, what that means is prices are going up, and that means currency values are falling. If there's a set amount of currency, that causes the money supply to fall, right? So that's a shortage of currency, right? And that causes interest rates to go up, right? If you have a scarcity of currency, it's going to cost more to get that money, and that the cost of getting money is interest rates, right? Now, if interest rates go up, right, that's not good for the economy, right? We'll talk about that in a second. But another way of looking at it is this: if you got inflation going up, let's say banks want to get money so that they can loan money. So if there's inflation, let's say there's 10% inflation. Well, if a bank gives you 9% inflation, or 9% interest rate, well, after you put your money there, the money you get back is going to be worth less than what you put in, right? You want to make some money. If you're going to put it in the bank, right? So you're not going to put it in the bank. You're better off, spending it. So what banks are going to have to do, they're going to respond by raising interest rates above the inflation rate, right? One example is the whole stagflation era, Jimmy Carter. I mean, you took at that time, and early Reagan years too. Paul Volcker was the chairman of the Fed back then, and interest rates were 12, 13%, right? They back then about that, right? Double digits. So as also the simple fact that with inflation, the value of money you put in the bank today will be less in the future, which requires banks to increase interest rates above the inflation rate to attract capital, right? So if interest rates go up, well, that's not good for the economy. Companies don't have the money to invest, to expand, to grow. You don't have the money to buy big ticket items like a home or maybe a car or, I don't know, washing machine, whatever you buy on credit, maybe a big screen TV, I don't know. So that slows the economy, right? And then if that slows, well, then you get recession, you get depression, right? And then if economic activity slows, right, income falls, and then they get less consumption. But on the flip side, well, that benefits oil prices, right? So there's decreased oil demand for oil, right? This happens. May not happen uniformly around the world, but it happens, wherever there's a slowdown in an economy, right? And then with less demand for oil prices fall, right? So what this leads to is, right, with decreased price and decreased demand, then revenues for oil producing nations fall, right? And this happened in the 80s. 98 was an example. That was the Asian financial crisis. In 2008 was the world financial crisis. The big, housing market, mortgage meltdown there. Therefore, it is in the interest of oil-producing nations to maintain production at levels that support a growing world economy. In other words, getting greedy and restricting production to increase prices and profits backfires. So this is what was recognized by OPEC. And a key proponent of this was Saudi Arabia, right? They wanted to increase production to raise price, but they also knew that if they raised it too much, right, and that slowed the economy, right, they understood that oil was a key factor in the health of the economy. Raise prices too much, you hurt the economy, right? People get out of work, economic activity falls, there's less transportation, there's less demand for oil prices fall, and oil consumption falls. That's a double whammy. Demand falls, prices fall, right? So it comes around to bite OPEC in the back if they raise prices too high. So they realize that. So they play a marginal game here, right? Trying to manage the world economy to maintain a healthy world economy while at the same time maximizing their profits, right? All right. So it's a kind of a balancing act that they play here, right? They know it's no good for them if they crash the world economy. So what I say here is, a good way of looking at this is, there are different ages which characterize major advancements in societies in terms of material control. The first age you all know of is the Stone Age. You think of Fred Flintstone and the cavemen and so forth, right? Stone Age, whatever, you know. And then the Bronze Age, and then you have the Iron Age. Well, the next big age, as far as I'm concerned, is oil and synthetic chemistry age. And this is the big change because this is the change where you had a major explosion in the possibilities of controlling matter and major explosion in the invention of new materials. All right, it came with the ability to control organic chemistry, which is the backbone of synthetic chemistry. And organic chemistry does not mean natural, all right? That's kind of the pop. Organic chemistry means carbon based, all right? And it's because carbon is probably the most versatile element of the whole periodic table. That's why we're carbon based organisms, because you can make every damn molecule we need to survive, and there's like crazy numbers of molecules in our body, types of molecules in our body, right? Bottom line, oil is a huge impact upon our economy, whether as a fuel for transportation, which is the basis of commerce and thus our economy, or as a fundamental building material for the synthetic chemical industry, right? The question is not what is made of oil. The question today is what is not made of oil, right? Okay, so we're going to take a look at why oil is so important. All right, so kind of as a review, oil is so important because it is a fossil fuel, energy, and transportation. It's also for home heating, but for our economy, it's for transportation. That's the basis of commerce, and that's the basis of our economy, right? Cheap source of readily usable hydrocarbon chains. All right. Reason being is Earth did the work for us, right? So oil they believe is made from animal life, whether it's microscopic organisms in the oceans or dinosaurs, whatever. I don't know where it came, but they believe coal came from plant life, right? Which is a carbon-based organic form of life, and then animals are also a carbon-based organic form of life, right? Breakdown of that. So over many years, under the high pressure of the earth, under high temperatures, it's broken down to simple carbon chains. Now, once they're broken down, you form simple building blocks that you can use for the chemical industry. It's cheap because it's already broken down. If you're going to make this from plants, for example, you're going to do some complex, breakdown of plants, some complex chemistry, right? Well, it's already broken down for you. That's the idea. All you got to do initially is do some fractional distillation. You're breaking it out based upon carbon chain length and molecular weight. There's also some variation in types of hydrocarbon molecules. There's rings, there's branching ones, right? But anyways, you can separate the weight by fractional distillation. Why is carbon the basis of organic life? All right, and the synthetic chemical industry. So we're going to talk about that now. Why is carbon so important? All right. Well, one, carbon has 4 valence electrons, and I don't know if you remember a rule from chemistry. It's called the octet rule, where through stabilization of orbitals, all right, elements gain their max stability when they have a full octet, which is a full 8 electrons in their outer shell, which is always an s&p orbital, right? Once you get to the higher ones here, you get interaction with inner orbitals, d and f orbitals get in the mix here a little bit, right? But for the most part, s and p orbitals are the most important. 2 in the s, 6 in the p's, which gives you 8. That's the octet rule, right? You get a full 8, you're stable, right? So carbon has only 4, which means it needs 4 more, right? So that's maxing out the number of bonds it needs. It needs to make 4 bonds, right? And that allows for you to have single bonds, double bonds, triple bonds, right? So you can have multiple types of bonds. That gives you variation in properties. Bonds have different properties. A double bond is going to be different from a triple bond and from a single bond, right? This is a ring. You see you got double, single, double. Well, it's kind of like distributed, this is a benzene ring, right? So it's like 1.5 spread evenly all around. But here you got a double, here you got a triple, so forth, right? All right. So you got variation in bonds, right? But the big thing is electronegativity. Now, electronegativity is an element's relative attraction for electrons. The higher number has the highest attraction electrons. So these guys have 7 electrons in the outer shell. They're the halogen elements, right? How many do they want? They want 8, which means they want only one more, and they're desperate to get one more. So they have high attraction for electrons. I'm not going to explain why it varies here within that column, right? And the lowest is down here. Cesium has 0.7. So it runs from 0.7 to 4.0. 2.5 is roughly right in the middle. Where the hell is carbon? Carbon is over here, but it's right in the, there's 2.5, right? It's right in the middle of electronegativity. And what that means, it turns out, is whatever carbon bonds to, it's going to bond with a covalent bond, which is shared electrons. Now, if you share electrons, you form what's called a molecule, which is a discrete particle with very distinct properties. Now, if you have a big difference in electronegativity, it's going to form an ionic bond, which forms a mineral or crystal or salt, right? That's what it is, basically, a salt, right? It's got very limited properties. It's not going to do very much other than, you measure properties of the melting point, hardness, conductivity, so forth, solubility, whatever. But it's not going to give you these complex properties of complex molecules, right? Which is the basis of life. You're not going to live based upon salt. Your body's not going to be made of salt, right? Unless you're a pillar of salt, I'm just kidding. Lot's wife. Okay, electronegativity ranges from 0.7 to 4.0. Carbon is 2.5, roughly right in the middle. So if you take carbon and you bond that with fluorine, the most electronegative element in the universe, right? The difference is 1.5, and that's a small enough difference to be a covalent bond, which means you form shared bonds, shared electron pairs, bonds, which forms molecules, discrete particles that are non-dissociable. They don't break apart, right? Salts you can put in water, dissolve it, break apart, right? Like table salt dissolves in water, breaks apart. These don't break apart. They maintain their properties, right? Very important. Electronegativity difference less than 1.67 means you have shared electrons. That means you have covalent bonds, and that means you have molecules, right? If you have electronegativity difference, so let's take sodium. Sodium 0.9, chloride 3.0, difference is 2.1. 2.1 is greater than 1.67. You get ionic bonds, which means you get salt crystals, right? It doesn't have complex properties. It's got simple things like hardness, melting point, solubility in water, how will it change the melting point of water? Very simple things. It's not going to be able to sustain life with complex, functions, right? That are possible only with molecules. So molecules are stable, discrete particles with distinct properties, right? Which means they can have very distinct and complex functions, right? Often very specific properties. So the idea is, I'll show you some examples of complex molecules down here. The idea is molecules are like words and the elements are like letters. So one way of looking at it is, with an alphabet, you can make an infinite amount of words. You can make up any word you want as long as there's a concept that has meaning, right? You can create a word for that, right? Right? There's an infinite possibility of words. There's an infinite possibility of making molecules if we can think up clever ways of doing it. And if you make a molecule that has a very important beneficial property, well, you can make millions. You can become super rich off of this. You patent it, right? Right. So with an electronegativity of 2.5, carbon makes covalent bonds with just about anything. Example is, CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons, it's called, right? Things like Teflon, Freon, right? It's reacting covalently with fluorine, right? One example is radioactive glucose. Maybe this help you understand, okay? So glucose is the form of energy that our body needs. It's sugar, right? This is simple broken down sugar, the most simple form. It's one sugar molecule by itself, right? As opposed to linked sugar molecules. Um, and it's in a ring shape here, right? And radioactive glucose is used to locate cancer cells in your body, right? You use like a CAT scan, right? And what you do is you ingest these sugar molecules, which are what do you call it? Tagged with a radioactive isotope, whatever it is here. I don't know whatever. Oh, that's a radioactive fluorine. Oh, that's what it is. Radioactive fluorine. Let's see. Can I see? Yeah, yeah. So it's a radioactive isotope of fluorine. All right. Now, um, what happens is this: cancer cells are cells that have lost regulatory control. They're out of control. They're just going crazy haywire. They're reproducing super fast, growing super fast, and they have super fast metabolism. There's no the speed, overspeed, governors have just gone, right? Right. So they need a lot of sugar. They're metabolizing fast. They're reproducing fast. And what that means is when you eat this radioactive glucose, most of this stuff goes to cancer cells. Now, it accumulates there because that fluorine, not only is it radioactive, but fluorine being very, very electronegative is an electron withdrawing element. And if you have an electron drawing element in a carbon ring, that's called ring stabilization. It stabilizes this ring so it cannot react. It becomes inert. You cannot break this sucker down. So every amount of this you consume, it stays around, it sticks around. If you don't break down glucose, you don't get rid of it. So those cancer cells get loaded with these radioactive glucose, all right, and they stay. But then if you go under a CAT scan, it lights up like a Christmas tree. It shows you exactly where it's at, right? Right. So this is a molecule because it is covalently bonded to fluorine, right? Teflon doesn't break down because it's a molecule with carbon covalently bonded to fluorine, right? Same with Freon, right? Now, steel is when you have a metal. So where's iron? Iron is right there, right? 1 point something, 1.8 to 2.5. That's very close. Electronegativity. That it's covalently bonded. So if you get iron, iron is kind of a softer metal, right? It breaks down. It's not as hard. But if you combine it with carbon, it makes steel. It's harder, more durable, right? Stronger, all right? And it's because it forms a bond. It's called a carbonyl carbon bond via carbonyl process. Right here, it has to do with electron shifting, right? So the electron is shifted to the carbon, right? And then the triple bond here is shifted. Anyways, okay. So that's the end result there. You have basically a polar molecule there. All right. Now let's take a look at some other things here. Okay. So this is a cell signaling protein, right? There's like hundreds of proteins in just this strand here. Right? Amino acids, right? So these are complex molecules, all right? And they have a very specific shape, right? They perform a very specific function. Without these, your body doesn't survive. Your cells do not work, all right? It's only because carbon can form so many different types of bonds, right? And form molecules, all right? So here's another example of a complex molecule, an enzyme. Super complex, often multiple molecules joined together in a complex structure. And within the structure, there's an active site, probably in here somewhere. This creates an electron valence cloud, very specific, so it attracts two specific, let's say, molecules, one here, and it arranges them properly, and it makes it easy to have a chemical reaction. Without these enzymes, you will not conduct chemical reactions. It lowers the activation energy of chemical reactions, making them impossible. Without these, you do not live. These are catalysts, right? All based upon the fact that it's carbon-based, right? Making molecules because electronegativity is 2.5, right? I don't know. I'll talk about the immune system. So here's another example. Okay, Kevlar. Kevlar is made from oil. All right. Bulletproof vest made from oil. All right. Graphene. That's a new hot thing here. Graphene has sp2 hybridization. Remember I said you have 1s and 3p orbitals, right, in the outer shell. Well, you combine s and 2p's, and you have one unhybridized p. This is the unhybridized p. These are the hybridized sp2s, right? Make 3 bonds. This is unbonded, right? And what happens here is you get easy electron transfer between these orbitals, right? So within graphene, it is 100 times more conductive than metals. Super easy connectivity of electrons across the sheet, right? The problem is there's difficult connectivity from sheet to sheet. So if you don't make one continuous sheet, then you have some problems there, right? But it is 200 times stronger than steel, right? Another property is it's transparent, right? This is a single layer molecule here, right? And it's transparent, so there's a possibility of using graphene as electric conducting material in solar panels, which are see-through. So what that means is there's a potential that when you build a brand new skyscraper, every damn window you look through is going to be a solar panel. It's going to produce electricity, right? And then every damn skyscraper is going to be a big energy generator, right? And that's going to be a big saving on electricity, And when you get the stuff going, and if you can, get price down, right, make it feasible, right, it's going to bring costs down, right? And every time you bring costs down, that allows for economic growth. Okay, carbon-based superconductors. Okay, so that's a new possibility, right? So one of the things, the key thing that's holding back renewable energy is its reliability. That it varies, based upon how much wind there is. It varies based upon how much sunlight there is, and that's going to vary every day, right? As far as sunlight, right? But right now, renewable energy is the cheapest form of energy production by far, and it's going to get cheaper as we keep increasing the efficiency of these panels, as we keep increasing the cost savings in production, right? It's going to get even cheaper and cheaper. There's a lot of room for growth. This is the growth area, not in coal. There's no growth area in coal or natural gas, right? The growth area is in, right? But the key limitation is reliability, right? And there's two strategies for solving this. One is storage, right? The other is long distance transportation, right? With superconducting material. If you get a carbon-based superconducting material, right, that you can make cheap, that's going to be a game changer, big time, right? I don't know what the chances are of that is, but I'd like to see it. It has to do with figuring out the production process, making continuous long sheets of graphene if you can, right? I don't know how that's possible. Oil plays a part in every, or it doesn't have to be graphene, it could be something else. Hopefully someone will come up with something. Oil plays a big part in every single product. If it's not in manufacture, like I said, today we don't live with just simple things like you did 200 years ago, right? We live with very complex materials that we take for granted, right? Most of it is made from oil. If it's not in manufacture, then it's in transportation. So I give some simple examples here, right? Let's say you go to the store. You want to buy, you got the 4th of July coming up here. You want to get ready for a cookout. You want to buy some ground beef, right? Cook some burgers, make some dogs, whatever, right? So you want to buy some ground beef. When you go to the store, buy some ground beef, they're not going to slap a lump of ground beef in your hand and say, here you go take this to the checkout, right? It's going to be in a package. That styrofoam package is made from oil. The absorbent liner is made from oil. The clear plastic on covering it is made from oil. The ink on the label is made from oil. The fuel to get that beef to market is made from oil, right? The fuel for refrigeration, as that the refrigerated car is going to market is made from oil, right? Every vaccination that animal gets, right, as it's growing up, gets oil. Every medicine it gets, every steroid you inject into this cattle, right, made from oil. The fertilizer to grow the feed fodder made from oil. Well, in our country, we have enough natural gas that we make it from natural gas, right? That's the base molecules for fertilizer. I mean, usually the base molecules are what? Potassium, nitrogen, phosphates, right? But the base molecules are carbon based. All right, fuel for farming, right? The farm machines to get the feed and for transporting the feed, right? You know, if it's not grains, it's like hay, whatever. Well, that's oil, right? Here's another example, right? Most of you guys have taken an airplane ride, right? You walk into an airplane, right? What in that whole cabin is not made from oil? Everything, every damn thing in that is made from oil, right? From the plastic, instruction cards that you read, to the seat belts, to the carpet, to the fabric of the seats, to the foam, to the tray in front of you, to the overhead bins, to the ceiling bins, to the air vents, right? To the plastic windows, everything is made from oil except for the seat buckles and the aluminum frames for the seats. That's it, right? Just two things. I mean, everything else is made from oil, right? Okay. Let's see here. All right. Switches, yeah. Seat handles, okay. Windows trays, all right. Okay. All right. So what I want to do is, and I expect I'll get an attack here, right? Let's go back here, right? So we got some key guys here, right? We got the Secretary of Interior. He understands that industrialization has grown on the back of oil, and you got Woolsey here, right? Right. I mean, it's just common sense, right? And I want to show you a correlation. Economy is more complex than just oil, but oil is undeniably a central factor in our economy. It's not the only one, right? But it is a key factor in our economy, right? I believe it's going to be less so as more and more the economy shifts from transportation intensive things, right? I have that somewhere here? Do I have that? Where do I have that? Oh, okay, that's down there. I'll get to that eventually, I guess. So here's a likely attack. Correlation does not prove causation, but it can be a strong evidence, right? So some of the ways that correlation is betrayed by the evidence here is, well, you can have antecedent variables or intervening variables or bidirectional variables. I'm not going to teach that again. I taught that in my lesson on the scientific method, right? But you'll see bidirectional variables, multiple and okay. So oil price is OP, economy is econ, right? If oil price goes up, the economy goes down. There's a strong correlation for this. If oil price goes up, well, that's bad for your economy, right? Now, people argue, well, but there's only a weak correlation for as oil price goes down, the economy goes up, right? Well, the weak correlation can be explained by the fact that there's a bidirectional relationship here. As oil prices go down, the economy goes up, but as the economy goes down, oil prices go down. So you see how this is an inverse relationship. Oil price goes down, economy goes up. This is a direct relationship. Economy goes down, oil price goes down, right? Because as the economy goes down, well, people lose their jobs. There's less goods being bought and sold, less transportation. People don't have money to buy gas, less oil consumed, so oil prices go down, right? You see how these can counteract each other and cancel each other out, leading to a weak correlation, right? So, but let's take a look at. We'll take a look at the correlation between three things: oil price, inflation rate, and economic growth (GDP). Here is a baseline for growth, right? You're above baseline. Here is you're below. Above, okay, you see that, right? All right. I guess I'll go. So these are my individual graphs here, but what I did is I sized these to have the same scale, right? So here's like 1973, 1973, 1970, right? And then this is 1979, 79, 79. You get the idea here, right? So they all line up, right? I have these lines here showing things here, right? And I want to show you kind of how world events. And I mean, also you had peak oil production and so forth, right? That's coming into play, right? So we'll start there. We'll talk about peak oil. Peak oil was 1970, right about here. Okay, 71. You have Texas Railroad Commission setting pro rationing at 100% production capacity, right? We're producing all that we can, and we're not even making it. Right? We got to import oil, right? Which means the monetary spare production shifted over to OPEC, right? They control price, and then what happened in 1973? Here's the Yom Kippur War, right? Remember I told you oil prices jacked up, all right? And okay, so OPEC embargoed oil, no oil for you, right? So what happened to oil prices in the United States? Skyrocketed, right? Here's World War II, right? 47, so 45 is here, and it's going, it's right. There's a little bit of recession here, and then it's going up here. Got the Cold War starting, we're recovering, and then oil prices dropping off steadily. But then Yom Kippur comes along, bam, right? Jacks up. What happens to inflation? Inflation here, bam, right? It's like perfect correlation. Dropping off here, dropping off. Okay, it's dropping off, right? What happens here? You have the Iran Revolution, right? Oil production out of Iran is cut, right? What happens to prices? Bam. What happens to inflation? Bam, right? We'll go through all this, right? And then key thing is, if inflation goes up, now it has an inverse effect upon the economy, right? Remember I said that inflation is bad for the economy, especially the driving up of interest rates, right? So the economy tanks, right? So let's do this. We'll just go through some key things happening here, all right? So here, OPEC embargoes oil to the U.S. Oil prices jack up. They start dropping down again. But then you got the Iran Revolution, right? And that jacks up oil prices. But then you got the Iran-Iraq War, and that helps bring prices down greatly. Oil becomes very efficacious. War becomes very efficacious for bringing down oil prices, right? I'll explain the process in terms of debt and so forth, right? In terms of economic warfare, more so when we get to it, right? In the main part of the lecture. And then what happens? The war is over by 87. Oil prices come up, come down, come up again. They start handing up. Then you get the Gulf War, right? The Gulf War, the key effect of the Gulf War was it busted OPEC, right? It singled out Saudi Arabia and Kuwait as having, no maneuvering room. They have to overproduce, right? Beyond OPEC quotas, right? And it busted OPEC, right? So prices are falling for a full decade. Well, nine years prices went down. OPEC was on its back for 9 years. And then what happened is, right about here, 98, you had the Asian financial crisis, which then took down the Asian economies. You had basically a crash in Asian economies, and that killed oil consumption. So prices fell, right? And then what happened is OPEC reconstituted, right? The combination of the low oil prices going up, but then what happened was when the Asian economy tanked, oil prices fell so much that Saudi Arabia eventually gave in, right? They were the ones who were obstructing OPEC unity, them and Kuwait, but primarily Saudi Arabia, right? They're preventing OPEC unity and adherence to oil quotas because they had to overproduce. They came out of the first Gulf War with so much debt, right? From weapons purchases, from paying for the lion's share of the American war costs from paying for their war efforts, right? They came out with such huge debt, they had to keep overproducing. So it busted OPEC, right? And the rest of OPEC then fell apart, and it was like every man for himself, produce as much as you can, prices falling, right? And um, and then what happened is that they decided, okay, finally, Saudi Arabia made big cutbacks in its weapons purchases and big cutbacks in its welfare society. You know, the royal Saudi family just dishes out money, almost like a welfare thing, right, to keep the people happy here, right? Well, they made big cutbacks, so people were struggling, right? But they had to do that, and because they cut back, they were able to cut back production, and oil prices started to recover, right? And then Hugo Chavez comes along, and he plays an instrumental role in getting them to cut back production, right? So prices are going up, right? And then you get the recession, U.S. recession. This is the George W. Bush recession, and then you get 9/11, right? And and then after 9/11, 9/11 actually was a short-term hit upon the U.S. economy, but we quickly recovered. It was mostly in the economy didn't really take a hit here. Let's take a look here, but oil did because transportation, air transportation, and hotel vacationing really took a hit there. Let's see here. Okay, let me try to explain this better then. Okay, so you see OPEC embargoes oil prices go up, whacks inflation, big jump in inflation rate. Look at that, looks like about close to 12%, right? Which means interest rates are above that. That's high interest rates. That's hard to get money, right? You're paying a lot for the money you're borrowing, right? People are cutting back. People aren't making that they're not buying that home, whatever. They're not buying that car, right? That's hurting our economy. Um, you're not starting a new business. So then it starts falling. You see, it starts falling here, right? Look at our economy. It goes down here, and then prices, oil falls, so the economy recovers. Falling oil prices, economy recovering. Then you get whacked here with high oil prices again, high inflation, high oil prices, high inflation. You see the peak. This is almost a perfect correlation. I mean, come on, right? And then the economy tanks. See that inverse relationship here? Positive correlation here, negative correlation here. All right, and then you have the Iran-Iraq war. Well, right. So this shows the efficacy of war in oil-producing Middle East countries, right? So if you have two oil-producing countries like Iran, like Iraq, at war with each other, right? Well, how do they finance their war? How do they pay for the war? How do they buy new weapons? How do they pay for everything they need to operate an army and a navy, whatever, right? Well, right, if their economy is based on oil, they sell more oil. If you sell more oil, there's more oil in the market. But it's not just them, right? Big players were Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, and United Arab Emirates. Those are other Sunni nations. And what happened was the other Sunni nations supported Iraq against Iran, who is Shia, all right? And so they practice economic warfare against Iran. Iran is getting its tankers and its oil facilities whacked by Iraqi air attacks, right? Almost on a nightly basis. The Iraqis flew a flight of 3 F-1 Mirages in what's called the Farsi Hook, right? Coming down to Farsi Island and hooking up, northeast to Karg Island or whatever. What the hell is that? Bashir? I forget the name of the big oil export facility port there. Was it Bashir? Let me look it up real quick. Okay, Karg Island, somewhere around here. Oh, Bashir. Yeah, I was right. How about that? My brain still works. Where the hell's Karg Island? Where am I at here? There's Karg Island, right? Bandar Bashir. Yeah, this whole area is like their oil export facility stuff right there, right? So they're getting whacked. They're flying F1 Mirages coming down to where's Farsi Island? Where's Farsi Island? Farsi Island's somewhere down here. I don't know. Okay, and they're flying their French F1 Mirage fighter planes and firing their French Exocet missiles, right? Um, all right. So the idea is the Sunni nations are overproducing oil, driving down oil price. Well, they're coming out okay because they're the ones who are increasing their output, right? So the loss in oil price is made up by the increased volume of their sales, right? But not so Iran. Iran's getting their tankers whacked. They're limited as far as their capacity to ship, and they're losing revenue, right? So this is a means of economic warfare against Iran, right? But the sum effect is oil prices are coming down due to the war. You got to finance a war. You're practicing economic warfare, right? War became a very effective means of controlling oil price. All right. Um, okay, so 87. That's when the Iran-Iraq War ends. Right. Let's see. So, look at how perfectly it's tracking. Right. I mean, this is you get a correlation coefficient of 0.85. I've seen data, right? I mean, you see stuff like this, you're looking at whatever, R value, whatever, a point 0.85, 0.95. I mean, that's a damn strong correlation, right? And then prices coming, the economy is coming back. Oh, what do you know about that, right? Right? And then you have a little spike in oil prices here coming up. The Iran-Iraq war is over, right? Prices coming up here, and the economy is going down with that, right? Uh, and then you had the Gulf War. Uh, the Gulf War, yeah, OPEC busted, all right? And when the Gulf War happened, I was reading. I went back and read every damn article about OPEC. In about a 10-year time frame, uh, just before the Gulf War, and for about 10 years after it, right? And I read every damn article in the New York Times. And during the Gulf War, there was many articles, about a half dozen articles or so, talking about what they predict is going to happen to oil prices with the Gulf War. They nailed it. They said, once the ground war starts, oil prices are going to plummet, right? And then the long term effect is going to be OPEC is going to be shattered, right? Both Kuwait and Saudi Arabia are going to be cut out, right? Singled out. They're going to be restricted in trying to cut back production, right? And that's going to break OPEC unity, right? That's going to bring down oil prices, all right? And sure enough, that happened, right? Look at oil prices falling steadily here, all right? Okay, so what happened here? This is the Bush. First, this is George H.W. Bush recession here, right? Got him kicked out of office. Clinton comes in. He's doing okay, right? It is a pretty sustained period of growth. They say it's the longest sustained period. It's not fabulous, but it's sustained anyway. Period of growth without a war, right? All right. And then what happens? Where are we at here? Oh, 98. So what happened in 98 is there was a currency crisis. I think it was Thai currency, as I recall. Thai currency uh, kicked off a currency crisis, and that kicked off a economic meltdown, basically in Asian countries. Right, their economies are crashing. Right, their demand for their transportation, is going down. So their consumption of oil is going down. If the consumption of oil is going down, demand's going down, prices are falling. Prices fell so sharply, right, that Saudi Arabia eventually gave in and had big cutbacks in their their society-wide welfare program, right, and their weapons purchases, right? They made big cutbacks, and with those big cutbacks, they were allowed to cut back production, right? Get in line with OPEC. OPEC started recovering. Then Hugo Chavez comes along, and he organized a big a cutback. That was about 2000 2001, I believe, right? Right about here. Oil prices going up, right? And now, what's interesting is with oil prices going down, inflation goes up. Look at that. See, you got another. Look at how damn good this correlation is. Look at that. It's almost like a exact replica there, right? But our economy is going up here. So look at our economy. So the idea behind this is, right? Here's where you get the weak correlation between oil price and oh no, actually low. Well, that's low oil price. This is helping us. Yeah. So that's helping. That's helping us. No, that's a good correlation, right? Low oil price, low inflation, economy's doing okay here, all right. But this shows a disconnect between the Asian economies. So the Asian economies are tanking here, right? And the idea is, this is what is often said, that you know, U.S. is the main economic engine of the world, right? So if the U.S. economy sneezes, then the rest of the world catches a cold, right? So if our economy tanks, well, all the other economies will tank. But if other economies tank, that doesn't really affect us. So Asian economies are tanking. We're doing fine. We're running right along, right? Because we're the main driving engine. We're not responding to them as much, right? If that makes sense, okay. Then 9/11 occurs. Well, here's the Bush. Here's the Bush economic recession. 9/11 occurs. Let me right about there. So here's the Bush slide into recession, right? What happens with 9/11? Well, our economy starts recovering, right? You know, we got a war economy, big military buildup, right? You also have Homeland Security building up too for the first time, really big, right? And then oil prices started going up. Now, the big driving factor behind oil prices here, this big climb, this is a whopping climb here, right? Almost $100 per barrel. What happened here was this is the rise of the Asian economies. You know, the Asian economies, like Chinese economies, started increasing back in the 80s, whatever, right? There was a slow buildup. But both Asia and India started really taking off here, right? And then they started forming a middle class. They were able to buy cars, right? Not only do they have more transportation for commerce, but they're also having a middle class, buying cars, buying more cars, right? Consuming more gasoline, right? So this is a demand-driven, a big demand-driven, and this is when gas prices started going really high, right? And then what happened here? So it's going up there, going up, inflation's going up, but the economy starts tanking, right? Well, there's more to this than just inflation here, but the economy, and then the economy crashes here. Well, this is the 2007 2008 financial crisis, right? So oil price is not the driver. It was the financing, which is the driver, which whacked the economy, right? Which whacked then oil consumption, and oil prices fell. Demand fell away, prices fell, inflation fell away. Well, no one's got money to buy things, so things are cheap, right? No demand, okay? No demand for oil. Oil prices fell. Then we started recovering, so oil prices picked up again, right? And what happened is they got higher after this, but then later, what's off the chart is fracking kicked in. Fracking kicked in right around 2010, but it was marginal, right? It wasn't much of a bump until it grew though. It grew like this, bam, right? So fracking got big, and then what happened was it's off of this chart, but I remember, for example, gasoline prices got up near me around $4 a gallon. All right, and then fracking kind of kicked in, and it started dropping below 3, maybe high 2s, maybe to mid 2s, and then the bottom dropped out. And what happened was fracking was becoming such a significant input into the overall world oil, fund here, oil stream, right? That Saudi Arabia OPEC tried to drive uh, frackers out of business, right? And the idea is to underprice them. That's a classic way of driving out your competition. You underprice them within the market, all right? And so what they did is OPEC started overproducing to drive down price below which the frackers are marginally profitable, right? So they'll be operating in a deficit and drive them out. But what happened was a lot of the frackers would shut down their more inefficient wells and just fall back upon their most efficient, most profitable wells, and they're able to survive. OPEC is like holding its breath, taking a hit, right? Who will cry uncle first? Well, it was OPEC. OPEC said screw it, and then they increased production, and the prices went up after that. But during that time when OPEC was waging price war, I remember gasoline prices got down to the cheapest I bought was $1.35 at a BP. Yeah, that was the cheapest that I got. I remember that. All right. And then prices went up to from there like $1.80, $1.90, so forth, right? And then they went up further than that. Yeah. Then you got COVID-19, and they bottom dropped out again when no one's driving, and now that we're kind of reopening our economy, it's gone back up to about $2 a barrel, right? The cheapest I seen was 99 cents. It was a Shell on Salem Avenue. I didn't go. I got that on Gas Buddies. I saw that on Gas Buddies. I was thinking about filling up, but I didn't. Um, anyways, okay. So you see, there's a damn strong correlation here. It's not the only factor for economy. You can't say that, right? But I tell you what, oil is a key factor. But oil, as far as making money, it's far more than just overall economy. All right. And put this to the side here. All right. I'll show you that when we get down to, anyways. So oil price clearly has a large impact upon the world economy. Do I believe less so to the extent that modern economic growth is in items that are not transportation intensive? All right, you're not hauling a lot of weight and size, whatever, lumber or grain, or I don't know, right? Or things like computer chips, high value, low weight, or even intellectual property. So much of our economy is based upon stuff that's just transmitted over the internet. All right, so it's far less transportation intensive. Far much of the economy is growing in sectors that are not transportation intensive, which means oil is going to be less of a factor. But it's still going to be a factor for a while, and I can't wait for the day when we shift over to electrified. That's going to be a big boost to their economy, and it's going to be good for the environment too. Okay. So next thing I want to just show you briefly is this will be the next topic. I'll just cover it real quickly in one lesson. I go through. I made an analysis of factors that affect oil price. All right, roughly all through supply and demand. That's the way it works, right? All these different factors, and I threw this together in about an hour, maybe less than an hour, right? Although I went back and I fixed all the different letters and so forth and cleaned it up, right? But the 95% of this I threw down in less than an hour, and I'm not saying this to brag, but I'm just saying that I understand. I have an integrated picture of this in my head. All right. All right. So this will be the next lesson. That's it for this. So we talked about exchange theory, power in exchange. Okay. Hopefully you picked up on that. How do you get power in exchange?